No one inside the Yamaha garage expected the 2026 season to begin with such a haunting silence, a lack of celebration that signaled a deepening crisis for the sport's most ambitious partnership. When Toprak Razgatlıoğlu signed his historic contract, the narrative was clear: a generational talent meeting a legendary machine to dismantle European dominance. However, the first several rounds of the 2026 campaign told a much darker story. The paddock was filled with whispers that the Turkish star had finally met a challenge he couldn't outride. The Yamaha YZR M1, historically celebrated for its surgical precision and fluid corner speed, had become an enigma. For a rider who dictates terms with aggressive, late-braking entries, the bike felt like a stranger. Every time Toprak attempted to push the limit, the front end showed signs of instability, forcing him into a defensive posture that mirrored a fall from dominance. Internally, the tension was reaching a boiling point. Engineers were buried in telemetry, searching for a mechanical ghost that seemed to haunt every sector of the track. The media narrative was shifting from excitement to skepticism, with many claiming that the stop-and-go king could never truly master the momentum bike. This wasn't just a technical slump. It was a psychological weight that threatened to derail the most expensive project in Yamaha's modern history. The silence in the garage wasn't just about lost points. It was about the fear that the blueprint for success had been fundamentally flawed from day one. But just as the critics began to sharpen their pens, a secret development in the back of the garage began to hum with a different frequency, suggesting that the silence was about to be broken by a staggering revelation that would leave the competition stunned. But behind that calm expression and the familiar veteran stride, a strategic pressure was building fast as the professor stepped into the blue shadows. The introduction of Andrea Dovizioso into the Yamaha technical circle was not merely a hearing move. It was an act of desperation and genius. Dovizioso, a figure synonymous with the analytical rise of the Italian manufacturers, brought with him a Ducati-trained brain and a deep understanding of engine braking management. While the young engineers focused on aerodynamic loads, Dovizioso focused on the human-machine interface. He spent hours watching Toprak's onboard footage, not looking at the speed but at the pitch of the bike. He identified a fundamental rift. The bike was trying to be smooth while the rider was trying to be explosive. In the high-stakes world of MotoGP 2026, where a tenth of a second is the difference between a podium and a disaster, Dovizioso began a series of intense confrontations with the chassis department. He argued that they were chasing the wrong ghost. The issue wasn't the engine's power, but how the weight was transferred during the most violent moments of the race. This collaboration was a meeting of two different worlds: Toprak's raw, lightning-fast instincts and Dovizioso's cold, calculated technical logic. They began to strip away the traditional Yamaha philosophy, layer by layer, questioning every setting that had been considered sacred for decades. Rumors began to leak from the mechanics that the duo was working on something radical, a departure from the safe settings of the past. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of a gamble. If this failed, it would be a career-ending mistake for those involved. Yet, the twist that followed during the private testing sessions would change the championship narrative entirely, proving that sometimes you have to break the machine to truly fix it. Inside the garage, whispers began spreading about a magic setup that had supposedly turned a struggling machine into a mechanical predator overnight. This wasn't a single silver bullet component, but a complex tapestry of micro-adjustments that redefined how the Yamaha M1 interacted with the asphalt. Under the guidance of Dovizioso, the team implemented a radical shift in weight distribution, moving the center of gravity to a position that many engineers initially thought would be dangerous for tire wear. They refined the front suspension valves to a degree of stiffness that allowed Toprak to bury the front tire into the tarmac without the bike collapsing. This was the birth of the magic setup. It addressed the two areas that had been Yamaha's severe setbacks: front-end stability under extreme pressure and traction during the exit phase. For the first time in 2026, the telemetry showed that the bike was no longer fighting Toprak's aggressive style, it was amplifying it. The engine braking maps were rewritten to match Toprak's downshift rhythm, creating a seamless transition from 300 km/h to the apex of the corner. This technical evolution was so precise that even rival observers noted the bike looked different on the track: more planted, more violent, yet somehow more controlled. It was a package designed for a war of attrition, specifically tailored for the technical demands of circuits like Le Mans. Some insiders claimed that the bike had found a disputed advantage in its mechanical grip, but the truth was simpler. It was the perfect balance between a rider's feel and a machine's response. The data was frighteningly consistent, and the lap times were dropping into territory that made the European teams extremely uneasy. However, the real test was no longer in the lab or the private test. It was in the hostile environment of a Grand Prix weekend where every mistake is magnified by the world stage. Yet the real turning point happened away from the cameras as the team arrived at the Circuit de la Sarthe, carrying a secret that was about to explode into the public eye. Le Mans is a circuit that demands respect and punishes any lack of confidence, particularly in its brutal stop-and-go sections. As the first practice sessions of the French Grand Prix unfolded, the spotlight previously focused on the dominance of Ducati shifted toward the blue garage. Toprak didn't just look fast, he looked untouchable. The magic setup allowed him to exploit the heavy braking zones like the Dunlop chicane with a level of aggression that left his rivals bewildered. According to Paddock insiders, rival crew chiefs were seen staring at the Yamaha monitors, trying to comprehend how Toprak was finding grip where everyone else was sliding. The technical analysis was clear. While others were struggling with tire degradation, the 54 bike was maintaining a rhythm that was both rapid and sustainable. The reports suggested that Yamaha had found a way to cheat the wind and the tires simultaneously. The psychological pressure began to shift from the rider to the competition. The magic setup wasn't just a story anymore. It was a visible threat that was dismantling the established order of the 2026 grid. The paddock was buzzing with speculation, with some believing that Yamaha had introduced a secret swing arm pivot or a new electronics logic that bypassed traditional limits. The tension was palpable during the long race simulations, where Toprak's pace remained a staggering half-second faster than the predicted podium average. The narrative of the struggling giant was dead, replaced by the terrifying reality of a legend reborn. But as the sun set before the main race, a new rumor surfaced that would leave even his closest team members stunned, suggesting that this magic might have a hidden cost that no one was prepared to pay. But what the paddock discovered next shocked everyone. It wasn't just the bike that had changed. It was the man behind the visor who had rediscovered his killer instinct. A confident rider is the most dangerous element in motorsports, and Toprak Razgatlıoğlu had transitioned from a state of doubt to a state of absolute dominance. This was the rebound that Yamaha had prayed for. The psychological weight of the early season failures had been lifted, replaced by a fierce determination that was evident in every interview and every overtake. He was no longer simply defending his position. He was hunting the championship leaders with a calculated ferocity. This shift in momentum had a ripple effect throughout the entire Yamaha organization. Mechanics who had been working 18-hour days with somber faces were now moving with a renewed sense of purpose. The Toprak-Dovi partnership had created a culture of winning that had been missing since the previous decade. Media criticism, which had been relentless just weeks prior, began to pivot toward praise, calling it the greatest technical turnaround of the 2026 season. Yet this success brought its own set of challenges. With the magic setup making headlines, the pressure to maintain this performance was immense. The team had to navigate the political tensions of the paddock, with rival manufacturers reportedly filing inquiries into Yamaha's latest technical updates. Every small detail was now under the microscope of the fans and the stewards. The emotional highs of the French GP were tempered by the cold reality that the season was long and the competition would eventually respond. But for that moment, under the lights of the Le Mans circuit, the story was no longer about a severe setback. It was about a staggering comeback. The final question remained: could this magic be sustained, or would the pressure of the spotlight cause this fragile masterpiece to shatter under the weight of expectation?